right, we're back for another episode of the Dr. Beau Show. I'm Dr. Beau Beard here at the farm in Birmingham, Alabama. I feel like a newscaster doing my papers like this. This is going to be the last episode for a while. This is going to be the end of season 1. I said I was never going to do seasons, but I've got a lot of other stuff I got to do, and it'll be good stuff. So it'll be worth it. This will not be the last episode. There'll be one more though. And that's one that I've already recorded. That's with Michael Shacklock of Neurodynamics. So stay tuned for that one coming out after this. This is part 2 of Coming Clean. So I'll put a link in the show notes to part 1. Basically, Coming Clean was me just kind of saying, hey, things have gotten a little hectic. One of the reasons for taking a seasonal break on the podcast. And there's things I need to attend to. One of those things is making sure that even though when I say I'm letting my health slip, that's not, I mean, compared to the standard American, that's not the case. But, you know, I'm not trying to be standard. Who's trying to just be normal? That's kind of, that's probably a big problem. And talking about normal, let's talk about some lab panels, because we talk about normal values reference ranges, and those should be called death ranges, pathologic ranges. And that's not what we're looking for. So one of the things I did, if you listen to part 1, you know this, but if you haven't, I'm going to talk about in this show some of the things that I'm going to be looking at a little more, getting back to that I let slip, or adding into my routine to dial my health back up. Also maybe put a link to another show that I did called Health is Not Fitness. I believe it's that. It could be the palindrome of that fitness is not health. I don't remember what I put. I should have looked before I started, but I don't really care that much. And yeah, some of this is geared towards performance for me too, that I'm not just, looking to David Sinclair myself to 130 years old. And I definitely don't have the beard of Aubrey de Grey. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not in the longevity game. I'm just in the optimized health game while I'm alive. So let's get after it. So I did these labs through ArcPoint, who is our local lab company, and just explain something. So if you're local here in Birmingham, and even if you're not local, we could help you out, because ArcPoint ended up using Access Labs. But I looked at Wellness FX, which is a online and app-based lab company that does comprehensive lab panels. And then they have an app where they break down everything with cool colors and charts. That's really what you're paying for. And then you can add on a doctor's virtual consultation to go over those labs. I've never done it, so I'm not speaking from experience. I don't know how good that consultation is. It may be awesome. I hope it's better than what you would normally get, where again, you're just looking for pathologic reference ranges. We want to look at wellness ranges or optimized function. All that being said, let's also clear the air of these are just blood tests. There's a lot of bioindividuality. These are also what are called local reference ranges. So these labs take aggregate data from, it could be your zip code, it could be multiple zip codes, state, county. They reference those and normalize those for the reference range. So different labs will have different values, different labs in different areas will have different values. And then when you get into things like optimizing it, that's where you have to bring data to the party, because you have to know, well, what's actually healthy normal, not pathologic normal. So I did these labs and I did a comprehensive test. I'll go through everything that I did, and then I'll pull out some of the things that weren't awesome. And some of these that aren't awesome, it doesn't really matter. And we'll explain why. So first was just kind of your, Kim panel. So that's kind of, I added magnesium to this, but that's looking at like albumin, globulin, bilirubin, all that stuff. So I've always, if you've followed me for any time, you probably heard me talk that I've had some issues with a little bit of higher liver enzymes, AST, ALT. Nobody's ever really been able to pin down, our primary care, who is a top-notch functional medicine doctor. I've seen specialists. I've done a lot of my own research. These will always go up and down. Now, they used to be really high, and they've normalized. So now the only thing that's barely above normal is the ALT, and that's 59, which again, these reference ranges are different than I've had in the past. And that's a 0 to 48 for ALT. The AST was normal, but it's just below the normal high reference range. Those have always been a little bit high. And then the AG ratio, or albumin globulin ratio, is normal. So long as that's normal, and then you have this ALT, AST a little bit puffed up. But then a big thing to look with that is, because I have had a history of some kidney stone stuff, is alkaline phosphatase, and that's completely normal. So all that to be said, I could have, I've had my liver, I've had a CT scan. There's no, like, none at all. Like, when I got my CT scan, they looked at me and they're like, man, you must not drink. And I was like, got you fooled. Because there was no sign of, non-fatty alcoholic cirrhosis, which even if you drink, the standard one drink a night or a couple times a weekend, you'll have signs of that, also due to the standard American diet, which I don't eat. That you'll see lots of, saturated fats, polyunsaturated oils, just a lot of things that are going to take a toll on your liver. So who knows why that is? Could have a little genetic prevalence. I doubt that's the case. But when you start seeing a couple of these things together, and I'll jump ahead for a second, it's probably a genetic factor. So the other thing that's a little bumped up on me is total cholesterol is 221. I'm okay with that. The normal reference range is 200. I know I have a genetic prevalence of a little bit higher cholesterol, which is totally normal. What's flipped for me, and I don't know why, and I'll have to explore this through probably trial and error, is my HDL was always pretty high. The LDL bumped up over 100, so it's 118. That worrisome? No. But when you think all cholesterol is basically processed through your liver. So now I'm seeing a little bit of pump up in that ALT, or one of the liver enzymes. Then we see that my cholesterol is riding a little high, but then all of the apolipoprotein tests are normal. So what that could really mean is that I'm, for some reason, having a harder time processing or forming cholesterol. And via that, my liver is getting kicked, right? It's getting work. So it may not be a detox purification thing. It may be a workload thing, that as I try to form sterols within my body off the backbone of a fatty acid, that I'm not able to do so as well. For who knows, it could be a nutrient deficiency, could be a genetic thing, could be stress. It's something I'm going to kind of play around with. That's why we do these blood panels, right? So everything else on that Enzyme panel is normal. I did fasting insulin, which I've never done, and it was actually low. Now, I'll call myself out after I said, hey, I don't have any, cirrhosis. This test was done the Monday morning fasting after I had a guys' weekend in North Carolina. And there was some, as my ancestor would say, some brown water that was drank. And I don't know if that affected it grossly. It was 2.1, 3.0 to 25.0 is the normal. So like a low fasting insulin can be a sign of numerous things, right? Hypoglycemia, pancreatic issues in general, type 1 diabetes, which I obviously don't have. And you can have late stage adult onset, or maybe we should say adult diagnosed type 1 diabetes that's triggered by, it's type 1 is an autoimmune issue. So you can have an autoimmune issue show up at any time in your life. And again, that's not the case because of other tests here. So that's a little low. I would really like to get that retested when I've had a normal weekend, and see if it was still the same. If it was, then I'd explore it further. But that's, again, these are labs. This is like doing in the movement realm, this is like doing a top tier selective functional movement assessment. And that tells us some stuff, but it doesn't tell us the specifics. So it tells us what you can or can't do. What these labs say, hey, something may be off. That may not be important to overall function, but it may be a direct route to something wrong, or a secondary or tertiary compensation for something else that's going on. I went and did an iron anemia panel. So everything's normal from, iron, total iron, ferritin, folate. So we did a B12 test, totally normal. Cardio IQ panel, everything's normal for me. Here's one that they didn't call out that I'm like, why is that a little high? So homocysteine, which would be your typical marker of you've had a heart attack, right? Was, what was my reference range? 11. So they call 4.5 to 15.0 normal. 11's higher than I would like to see. Could be for a lot of reasons, right? Maybe my body thought I was trying to kill it with bourbon that weekend. I don't know. But that's higher than I would have expected, at least. And that could be, again, a variety of things. I run a lot. That's an oxidative stress. I ran that weekend, even though there's a lot of things going on there. And homocysteine is what we would call an acute marker of cardiovascular inflammation or systemic inflammation. And then CRP is your C-reactive protein is more of a sign of chronic or systemic inflammation, and that was completely normal or low. We already went over the cholesterol panel and what could be going on there. Again, there is a genetic prevalence for me to have a little bit higher levels of cholesterol based on genetic background. All my, HDL ratio is normal. PLAC is normal. Vitamin D levels 43. So the lowest range is 30. I would say normal is around what we'd want for healthy, probably like 45. Now, a little history there. I had low vitamin D showing up on tests for, I want to say almost 2 years that I started doing lab tests on myself when I got into practice out of school, really because the first blood panels I did out of school were for a life insurance policy, and it showed these liver enzyme panels that got us kicked. And I had to kind of write an affidavit to the insurance company showing that I was totally healthy, that this was genetic, abnormality. But out of that, I started checking stuff. And one of those things was vitamin D through our functional medicine doctor, Dr. St. Petrie. And it was like 24, 25. And it kept staying there, even though we were supplementing and, all the great supplementation, vitamin D 3 plus K2, and, everything was there. And what we found out was I have a really hard time taking the bioavailable form of vitamin D and then turning that into something that I can use. So I have to be really diligent with how much vitamin D I take. Managing stress, because vitamin D is a cofactor for upwards of, I think, 29 functions within the body, cellular functions. And then I also have to get outside and get some sun. So yeah, and that, 43 is pretty good. I've had it as high as 60. There is, problems with having it too high. Out of that, what else did we test here? Did a little endocrine evaluation. So looked at estradiol, DHEA, and IGF-1, or insulin growth factor 1. And then, so those are all totally normal. Looking at the reference ranges. Yeah. And then cortisol, which again, this is fasting morning. So they have on here morning to from 7 to 9 a.m. should be anywhere from 5.2 to 22.5 micrograms per deciliter. And mine is 13.9. So it's normal. Now, again, I would like to see, if you're really going to test cortisol, you have to do a 24-hour cortisol test to see if it tracks normally. So when you wake up in the morning, the thing that wakes you up or helps wake you up, besides hopefully, normal sunshine that kicks off hormone cascade, is cortisol. So cortisol ramps up in the morning. That's a stress hormone. That's why you want it to ramp up. It dials off mid-morning. It comes back up kind of after lunchtime. And then starts dialing back off. And then it goes up and down throughout the night. It does a little dance with growth hormone and insulin as well. So as your cortisol increases, your insulin increases for various reasons, or a variety of reasons, but it makes sense, right? Cortisol is a stress hormone. It releases glycogen. You need to be able to handle the glycogen, so you need insulin available. You just need to track those things. And companies like Thorne offer a 24-hour test. You can do a 24-hour test at, any Quest Labs or anything like that as well. So those are the lab panels that I did. So now I'm going to pull up something else here. So bear with me here for a sec. And I'm going to share my desktop. So if you're not watching and you're listening, prepare to be a little bit maybe bored for a second, but I'll try to do my best to explain this. So one of our other doctors, Dr. O'Quinn, filmed me doing a top tier SFMA. So what I was looking for here was just movement. So what we're pulling out, and I'll pause these at different ranges. So a top tier SFMA, or selective functional movement assessment, it was developed by Gray Cook and Greg Rose. Like I said, with these lab values, to look at broad strokes movement. And off that broad strokes movement, is there something we should explore further? So what we're trying to see is, what are my biggest sticking points? So we're going to find out right here, if you're watching, that this is my right arm. So this would be an internal rotation extension pattern, or what we call upper extremity pattern 1 for SFMA, is not great. Well, I've had issues, even though I was a throwing athlete my whole life, quite a few issues with, scapular stability, some minor shoulder injuries, nothing major ever. But this is something I need to work on in conjunction with some T-spine extension stuff, which Look for a video coming up on TL junction flexion syndrome here pretty soon. That'll be on YouTube. So now total body rotation to the right, if you're watching, that's pretty good, right? We're looking for shoulders perpendicular. We get about at least 45 degrees of hip turn or pelvis turn. So that's right. Now watch left. Got to work for that one a little bit. So I've had a left femur fracture when I was 9 years old. I have an intermedullary rod in my left femur. And, you know, not from that injury, but from the compensation over 2 decades of movement, I don't have as great internal rotation on that left hip. And you can see that showing up there. Now, again, in a patient, we would have to suss this stuff out. So total body flexion, that's actually pretty good. Uniform curve, posterior shift of the hips. Extension, maybe a little non-uniform curve there. Let's back that up for a second and pause. So if you're watching, again, you can see some of the standards for a pass would be do your hips, clear your toes, which mine do. But then you can see, we want to see a little more uniform curve. So if I had no shirt on, you'd see a little bit of hinge at L5S1 and a little bit of straightening at T4 through T8. And then ankle dorsiflexion, what's up? So big ones that I should be working on based off this, I'm going to unshare my screen and get back to normal, would be that left hip for sure, but some ankle dorsiflexion work would be awesome. But let's also be honest here. I'm a distance runner at this point in my life. One of my main hobbies is trail running. Anybody that's a runner increases stiffness in the lower extremity, especially if you're going to be a good runner. I can show you studies that if you take somebody's stiffness away, you make them worse. That may not be something I want to be awesome at right now in my life. Do I need to be better than that? For sure. One of the big ones that I really need to hone in on, because I have had some AC joint stuff on this right shoulder, are really those internal rotation extension positions paired with T-spine extension. And those always go hand in hand. And then of course, scapular stability or dynamic scapular stability. So those are things I will be working on. That's why we did that. So, you know, in addition to this episode being called Coming Clean Part 2, it could be called the 30,000 foot view. You know, this is something I suggest everybody do, whether we're guiding that process or somebody else, that you get these check-ins. That's why we're not just sending people off after an injury into the ether of go do your sport, never see us again. It's like, check in with us. You know, it could be a month, it could be every quarter, because we need to see how are you doing without you having the subjective input of how you're doing, because you may not know that you're not moving well. You don't really know what it feels like to be really healthy. You don't realize that, man, I am getting stressed and that's starting to affect other things. Now, outside of testing, what else have I been, reincorporating? Well, one thing that I got away from that I did religiously, that I've done this since 2002, which really makes me feel old. So almost 20 years, is journaling. And, I'm not like the sit down or, first thing in the morning, gratitude journal, whatever. It's, it hasn't been daily, but I'm going to try to make it a little more often here for the, near future, because it helps me kind of suss stuff out. And I don't just theme base my journaling that it has to be about something. It's just kind of free flow writing. Maybe I'm thinking about some projects. Like, I try not to turn it into business, but like, if that's what you're doing, that's what you're going to be thinking about. So I don't see any problems with that. So I just let it, kind of roll. I don't have a lot of structure to it. A lot of people be like, and I've tried a lot of them. I've tried gratitude journal, the height planner, a lot of these, I'm not a big fan of them. I would just rather sit down and write, get out what I'm thinking. It helps me process stuff. And then I transition a lot of the things from the journal into a planner, which a lot of people are like, oh my God. And then out of that, you're going to really think I'm crazy. I use Evernote to then like capture like research articles, websites, and kind of process ideas. So I'm kind of distilling. So the journal's like free form, then I've got like daily to-dos, and I use Evernote to kind of like keep a brainstorming area. Like if I ever have enough money for the office, I'd like, one of those big glass tables that you can just move stuff around. That's kind of what my brain probably looks like if you could put it on a computer screen. In addition to that, a little breath work in the morning. I got away from pure meditation. I don't know if I'll go back to just sitting down for 15 minutes. I used to use, not Headspace. Let me pull up the app. Brain FM. They just have either guided or unguided. I would do an unguided 15-minute meditation every morning. But what I'm actually getting into, which again, health is not fitness, fitness is not health, but I'm training pretty hard for this 20K Xterra that is on May 9th. So that's just forcing me to do things a little more diligently. And also, one of the bigger health things that we could do is be more aware of what are the things that are stressing you out, that you're letting stress you out, that are probably detracting from your health. And that's, again, why I said taking a little break from the podcast to, hone in on a book that I need to finish that's just been kind of like haunting me, that it's just sitting there. Unfinished things like that, at least for me, weigh on me more than I realize. But I just have some other little projects I need to be working on, but we'll definitely be back for a season 2. It may change a little bit, but I need to get some more guests. If you have suggestions on guests you'd like to see, let me know. But pay attention to my social media and YouTube. I'll be talking about some of this stuff, kind of giving details and follow up. And yeah, if you guys have questions on, anything I've done, or how can you do this for yourself, you can always get a hold of me at Dr. Beau Beard on any social media platform, drbeaubeard@gmail.com. Like I said, be on the lookout for the last episode number 35 of this season of the Dr. Beau Show with Michael Shacklock of Neurodynamics. And I appreciate you guys watching.